So this evening I want to talk about what it means to be awake. Because we hear the term used all the time, right? That people are asleep or they're awake. And the goal is to be awake and to be more awake. And but it really does beg the question of what that means. What is wakefulness? So when I was a kid, I was towing the party line, family, school, doing the whole thing and being fully indoctrinated into the ethos of the day, enculturated. And at some point, as is the case with so many kids, began to think for myself and started to look around me and see hypocrisy, right? I was waking up to the hypocrisy and the lie that was being promulgated, right? By parents, by church, by school, my friends' parents. It had no end. And I think that most of us can relate to a time in our lives when we started to see the BS and call it. And however we dealt with that, we dealt with it in various ways, but that we felt like we were seeing it, why wasn't my friend seeing it? I was seeing it, why weren't we all seeing it? Is everybody that asleep that they can't see this hypocrisy? People are talking about, God is love at church, and yet they're obviously not behaving that way when they're talking in the parking lot before they get back in their cars. If they're, whatever it is, in other words, there's this breaking open of the indoctrination shell. And we start to see that and go, yeah, I'm not buying into that anymore. And we rebel in whatever ways, like I said, that we do. And that goes on, and that may be enough for some people. That's where they settled in at. Some people never see the hypocrisy. Some people see it and rail against it. If you don't rage against the machine, you don't, you're not paying attention. That kind of a thing. And then there's some who will go further, and that is that they see, for whatever reasons, they've had this further awakening to a level of manipulation of thinking and the consumerism that is forced down our throats, and how that works and why that works, and what the powers are be that have a vested interest in keeping us as consumers. When we stopped being citizens at some point, we became consumers. And then we started to become the commodity itself. And we start to look at those things and go, man, I'm really awake here. I can see this stuff, and I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. Whatever it is that we're reacting, however we're dealing with it. But we know that somebody else, one of our dearest friends, may not care or see or believe in that. They're just happy to get their paycheck and go and get their doodad thing and get it upgraded every 6 months, and that's what they're doing, right? And then there's another layer of this awakening that some people will go through, and that they see that that manipulation didn't just stop with the advertising agencies, that they're not really the bad guys, that actually they're just another one of the pawns in this mega conspiracy that is taking place behind the scenes, where the puppeteers are controlling not only what we buy and what we're being told we need and want and fed that kind of a line, but that that spills over into our political parties and the current events and why wars happen, and we start to see that there are forces at play that have such refined, exaggerated senses of self-interest and greed that they will stop at nothing, and that energy will permeate all these other levels that we've already awakened to, but now we see behind the veil. We see the wizard pulling the levers, and we know that it doesn't matter which candidate gets elected. They're all being puppets, right? And we keep waking up to these further troubling insights, and we don't know what to do with that. And some of us will end up being violent behind that, and think that the solution is in violent overthrow of the system. Some of us will devote our energies to exposing this at every turn to any ear that will listen and to many that won't, and so we refine that, and we hammer away at that, and it may, there are people who make it their life's mission, their hobby, their avocation, right? There's no part of life on earth that isn't revealed in that. All these things that were wrong, all these things that are happening are being orchestrated by forces that are other than what people normally think, right? It's not because somebody stepped across an imaginary line from one country into another and there was a retaliation. It's because of some other thing that had to do with this other thing and groups of people that we never hear about, okay? So there are some people who think, I'm awake. That person who just thinks that it's consumerism and that level of things isn't quite as awake as I am. They're getting there, but they're not there. And they're way more awake than that person who just sees the hypocrisy and, doesn't want to buy the party line anymore. And so there's this hierarchy of awakeness that people have, and none of it matters. Because if we want to say that there's actually a conspiracy, it would be the conspiracy of the mind of matter to delude us into thinking that any of that matters. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen. That doesn't mean that there isn't hypocrisy and that there aren't cabals and that there aren't, crazy international banking interests at play and all that. It merely means that that is not real. It's no more real than any other part of the illusion that we call life on Earth. Okay? So then there are some who will start to awaken to a sense of spirituality, we call it, right? The sense of the mystery of life, the divine. Okay. And they will gravitate towards one ideology or cosmology or another in that. They will latch on to the idea of the 7 rays and the 12 realms and the cosmic this, that, and the others, and so on. And the religions become extensions of these esoteric cosmologies. And for a reason, and I believe it's for a reason, because we need to have flavors of reality packaged for us in ways that are resonant with our soul at a given moment in our soul's journey, and that will help us. But none of that is real either. And so we have to ask ourselves, what are we actually talking about when we say awake? If I'm awake, isn't being aware of these other dimensions qualifying? Doesn't that qualify? And so it was said that the Buddha was asked, if he was enlightened, and he said that he wasn't enlightened, he was awake, right? And we were told by the Master Jesus, seek first the kingdom of God, which he already told us was within us, and all these things would be added to us. Okay? And so there's this awakeness that we start to yearn for that cannot have definition. So if we have an idea, they say that seeing is believing. Well, it's really the other way around. Believing is seeing. What you believe, you will experience. What you believe is what you will see, right? And so these cosmologies that we have lock us into a level of realm of vibration and being that give us a very real experience of that realm, but it doesn't have inherent, intrinsic reality. It's called conditioned reality. The Upanishads refer to that all the time, right? The conditioned reality. Unconditioned reality is that which is as it exists in the mind of the Creator, period. No embellishments, nothing else cobbled onto it. And so when Jesus said the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head, he's talking about that very thing, and that is that we cannot allow ourselves to settle into an expectation of experience, an expected kind of spirituality, an expected kind of cosmology. Spiritual materialism, as Chogyam Trungpa so clearly pointed out, is so prevalent and so insidious that most people who are on a spiritual path end up thinking that they are on a spiritual path when they exchanged their iPad for a cosmology, right? A thing, in other words, a belonging, a possession of some kind. And the reason that we have the religions and that we have these cosmologies is to release us from the necessity for that religion or that path. We're not to become slaves to it. That's not the end game, where we said, I am a Buddhist, and a Buddhist of this flavor, or I am a Hindu of that flavor, and that's my guru, and this is how. That might be our touch point. That's how we get into the game, but it's an evolving game that we must allow to take us beyond our concepts, beyond the cosmologies that we may have resonated with at given points. History is replete with people of all different stripes and calibers of spirituality who have fought tooth and nail over their spirituality, right? Of their cosmology, you know. Okay. So there are three things that I use as a yardstick, or a meter stick, if we're going to be more scientific. When I'm looking at things, okay, there are things that I would like to be true. I would like this to be true. It piques my interest. There's something in me that wants this thing to be true. Then there are things which I believe to be true, because I've started to have some experience of the thing. And so I have seen cosmic energy. I have seen the way auras work. I have seen angelic beings. I have seen discarnate entities. I've seen certain things. And so I say, okay, based on that, I can extrapolate and say, therefore, but that doesn't meet the criteria yet. That, to me, I've got things that I would like to be true, there are things that I believe are true, and then there are things that I know are true. And that, for all of us, must be a really high bar. It's not just a matter of, yes, that feels right to me. Or, yes, I've had certain experiences of that, even. Because all those experiences are experiences of what? Of phenomena. And phenomena is by definition temporary. It's fleeting. It's temporary. In and out. Here and there. Created and gone. And so there's something beyond the phenomenal world. And the phenomenal world exists on every level, save one. Yeah. So it's important for us to remember that there's this wellspring from which all comes forth, that we can immerse ourselves in and submit ourselves to, and allow us to be buoyed up by and infiltrated and permeated by, right? And then we can take a look at the world of phenomena, at whatever level we're going to plug into it, and see it clearly. And that is what being awake is. We cannot lay claim to being awake if we're still immersed in the momentum of activity, which is the phenomenal worlds, the dimensional worlds. But be involved and engaged in the phenomenal world we must, right? We must be. This is the world in which we practice our service, and we extend the Godhead and the Christ life and light through the activity of love. We bring that into every nook and cranny of creation. But we cannot bring that which we do not have, right? And the nature of the phenomenal worlds is to lure us into participating in them, engaging in them, losing ourselves in that momentum, you know. There was a saying that was attributed to an Eastern teacher of some stripe, I don't remember, that the greatest sin is activity, right? And that was an actual Piscean way of looking at spiritual endeavor. Was that you must separate yourself from the world and isolate yourself and become a recluse, or however you were going to, do that, a sadhu, or however you were going to pull away from the world, and so that you weren't caught up in its activity, because the minute that you got brought into that world of activity, you were lost in it. And that's not true anymore. Whether it was true ever or not, I don't know, but it's certainly not true now. What's true now is that we must be engaged in the world of activity without becoming lost in it. And there's only one way to do that. We have to come from the place of the eye of the tornado, and then we're very effective, right? But the moment that we allow ourselves to, through that force that makes you move out, the moment that you move away from that center of the eye of that tornado into the whirling winds and devastating debris that's flying around in there, right? You're lost, right? But if we can keep it coming back to that well, that deep well, and immerse ourselves in it over and over again at deeper, more deepening levels each time, then we have a shot at being able to be effective servants and to be effective in the world without being lost in it, being in the world but not of it, strangers in a strange land. We've all had that feeling when we're walking down the street and all of a sudden we go, whoa, what is this body? What are all those bodies? What is this street? What are these massive chunks of metal on wheels going down the street? And you say, I don't belong here. How did I end up here? Was I just teleported here? That's not something that you have to pay for. That's not a drug-induced experience, although I know that it can be. It's the experience that we have when we are become aware of ourselves as the beyond, as the stillness. And all of a sudden we look and go, whoa, this is not me, this is my body. Oh, I bet that's why I call it my body, because who's the my in that? And we start to go through that experience. Those are the things that give us the breadcrumb trail that leads us ever deeper. The greatest heartache I've had is seeing somebody who was given the gift of awakening, given the gift, the door was open to enter into the Holy of Holies, to step into that chamber within and to experience the oneness with self and God and all that is. And they settled for cabals and pointing their finger at the wizard behind the curtain, pulling levers and saying, and that is what my awakening is. See? Any questions about that? Have you had that experience walking down the street or all of a sudden going, yeah.
It's so seductive. This world of matter that we are a part of, and as I was saying to you earlier, I think it's getting sucked in and forgetting. It's like just forgetting what's happening, right? That you're being pulled away from what's true, and you're falling into the world, the illusion, It seems like a constant, for me, at the stage I'm at, it's a constant, just moving back and forth, and not yet being in that I, relating to the world around me. But it seems like I go back and forth.
Yeah, I've not met anybody who doesn't. I mean, not in the flesh. That's another one of those ideals that becomes an idol, that, and it's been something that's been a concept, an image that's been promulgated and perpetuated over, generations, centuries. That's really what we're, because we want that, we want that feeling. Now there undoubtedly have been great beings who, that was their experience of incarnation. That was it. I just don't have anybody working at my office who qualifies, including myself. The trick seems to be how we can get back when we realize that we've drifted, right? And we were talking about that and being able to become more and more self-aware so that we're not allowing ourselves to be caught off guard and say, I don't have any idea where I've been for the last hour, or I'm so engrossed in this anger or a reaction or in this problem that I'm going to be wrestling with that I can't even remember when it was that I strayed from that place, right? And so we just practice mindfulness so that we don't get caught off guard and by surprise like that as often. And so now instead of, days going by where we're embroiled in that momentum of matter, we are whittling it down to hours and then smaller and smaller, and because we have a spiritual practice, and because we are getting deeper with that and touching that deeper place more often in ourselves, and because we're practicing that mindfulness and we're getting better at that, we find ourselves developing the ability to get within a breath's distance, keeping it within a breath's distance, which for me means that I don't want to allow myself to stray ever, but I don't want to allow myself to stray from that place any further than a single breath can reclaim. So become aware of this drift and go. And it's there, you know. That's not magic or special. That's just being willing to do it.
Is there a thought that accompanies that breath in? Or is it just the breath itself?
Yes, the answer is yes again. So here's the panoply of things that get attached to that breath. There's the recognition that I am not breathing, I am being breathed.
Yes.
There's the recognition that spirit and breath are one and the same, that prana and pneuma are the same thing, that ruach is the same as breath, as the same as spirit, that I am inhaling the divine with every breath, because that's all that exists. Every molecule is divine, and that which is doing the inhaling is divine, because that is all that it can be. So there's all these things that are happening in that single breath that is just like, okay. So you don't want to ask my wife how good I am at that, because if she'll tell you, there's plenty of times when, yeah, he's gotten further than a breath, let me tell you. Right? Yeah. And you know, it's not really a matter of like, I'm going to bliss out. I'm going to go into that holy place which is quiet and peaceful, and that's not really it. And I know that that's the common concept of what it means to be centered, you know, and that. Or that there's an effort of will involved to be centered. Okay. So there's times when I'll just want to tell people, just breathe with me, would you? So I encourage you to look at whatever level of the definition of awake you may have settled into and have made your home, and then to trash it. Right. None of them are more real than the others, and that's the big shocker. Right? Okay. May the living light of the great Christ bless and grace each here and each who looks at this video and who hears these words now and always. Amen.